Something impossible happened in Texas. For 15,000 years, completely different people who never met, spoke different languages, and lived thousands of years apart kept choosing the exact same places to live, bury their dead, and worship. Archaeologists have never been able to explain why, but hidden beneath an ordinary cattle pasture north of Austin, a discovery of millions of artifacts gave us the missing piece. And once you see the pattern, you'll never look at ancient history the same way. Stick around, because the 5 clues we uncovered prove the secret isn't magic, it's way better. Before you call this luck or just old superstitions, wait till you see the hidden map that connects every single one of these places. Because what we found changes everything we thought we knew about how they survived. Across Texas, there are at least 10 major spots where ancient people came back over and over for 5 to 15,000 years. Not just decades, not just centuries, thousands of years. They kept coming back to the exact same hills, cliffs, and river bends. Their tools changed, their languages changed. Entire groups of people disappeared and got replaced by new ones, but they still kept coming back. Ask an archaeologist why. You'll get the same answer every time. We don't know. It was probably sacred to them. Let me show you what we actually know. The Morris Mound in Victoria County was used as a burial place for at least 10,000 years. Families separated by 200 generations brought their dead to the exact same piece of ground above the Guadalupe River. 200 generations. That's like the time from the Roman Empire to today happening 4 times over. Paint Rock has over 1,500 paintings made by dozens of different cultures across 2,000 years. Different languages, different tools, different beliefs, same wall. Spring Lake in San Marcos has proof that people lived there going back 13,000 years, maybe 19,000. It might be one of the oldest places people ever lived in North America. And right now it's under a lake where tourists ride glass-bottom boats, totally clueless that they're floating over where human history in Texas basically starts. The Kamal Sunk site, 13,000 years of people using it non-stop. Hugo tanks in El Paso, 10,000 years. The Galt site near Florence, 20,000 years, with 11 straight layers of different groups stacked on top of each other. Here's the question nobody's asking. Why these exact spots? Not why they thought these places were special. That's the lazy answer. The real question is what was so good about these locations that people kept picking them over and over through climate changes, super long droughts, giant animals going extinct, and entire populations getting replaced? Because sacred isn't really an answer. Sacred is the thing that needs explaining. Once you map out how they survived the worst droughts in history, you'll see that water that never runs dry was only half the story. Wait till you see what's hidden in the land itself, because the next piece of the puzzle shows a silent grid across the landscape that ancient humans had to follow. Every single long-term spot in Texas sits where 3 nature clues line up. Not 1, not 2, all 3. Clue 1, water that never stops. Not seasonal water, not a creek that dries up in August. I'm talking about springs. Water from underground that flows all the time, even during droughts. Spring Lake is the second biggest spring system in Texas. It pumps out 8 million gallons every single day. It has never stopped in recorded history. It's been flowing non-stop for at least 13,000 years, maybe twice that long. Kamal Springs, same thing. 8 million gallons from the Edwards Aquifer. It has never stopped. Not during the Dust Bowl, not during the huge drought in the 50s, never. The Galt site sits on Buttermilk Creek, which gets fed by springs from the Edwards Aquifer. Those springs are still there today, still flowing. Morris Mound overlooks the Guadalupe River, where springs come up from the rock layers below. Those springs are still there today, still flowing. Shuker Tanks sits in the Chihuahuan Desert, one of the harshest places in North America, but those 3 massive rock hills have natural bowls that catch and hold rainwater all year long. In a desert where it barely rains 10 inches a year and summer temps regularly hit 110 degrees, those water tanks mean life or death. You see it now, right? water that never fails. If you're a hunter-gatherer in central Texas 12,000 years ago, your whole life is about avoiding danger. You can't Google nearest water source. You can't call for help. If you walk 3 days to a river and it's dry, you die. Your kids die. Your whole family line ends. But if your grandparents told you about a spring that's never been dry in anyone's memory or in any story they passed down, that information is worth more than any tool, any weapon, any magic you could ever have. Water that never stops isn't sacred. It's your best shot at staying alive. It's the difference between making it and going extinct. Here's the part that proves it. Texas went through at least 4 super long droughts in the last 10,000 years. We're talking 50 to 100 years where most rivers stopped flowing, where rainfall dropped by 60%, where entire ecosystems fell apart. The people at these spring-fed sites, they didn't leave because the springs didn't stop. Dirt samples from Spring Lake show stuff kept piling up straight through every single drought period. That locks down the water. But water only explains part of it. Wait till you see what happens when the next piece clicks into place, because it shows a blueprint that ancient humans were forced to follow. Clue 2. Access to stone for tools. If water means survival, stone means money. You can't hunt without sharp points for spears. You can't cut up a deer with scrapers and blades. You can't grind up plants with grinding stones. Before metal existed, toolstone was basically currency. The Galt site sits right on top of the Georgetown Formation, some of the best chert in North America. Chert is like flint that breaks in really useful ways and stays super sharp. It was basically the iPhone of the Stone Age. Everybody wanted Galt chert. We know because Galt chert has been found at dig sites 300 miles away in Louisiana, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. People came to Galt, dug up stone, and traded it across a quarter of the continent. Antelope Creek in the Panhandle sits right next to the Alabites flint quarries, some of the most wanted stone in prehistoric North America. Alabites flint, with its red, white, and blue stripes, shows up in sites from Oklahoma to Kansas. It was a trade item for over 1,000 years. Paint rock sits in an area rich in limestone and chert chunks. Huecum Tanks has access to basalt for grinding stones. The White Shaman site overlooks one of the densest areas of quality chert in the lower Pecos region. Here's what happens when you control a spring that never runs dry and a stone quarry. You don't just control a resource, you control a supply spot. You don't just survive, you thrive. You become a trading hub. People come to you. And when people come to you, you get access to their stuff. Seashells from the Gulf Coast, turquoise from New Mexico, obsidian from volcanic areas. And if people keep coming to you for 200 generations, if your location becomes a known place on the mental maps that stretch 1,000 miles, guess what happens? You start painting on the walls. You start burying your leaders with ceremonies. You start building monuments. Water and stone explain how they thrived, but how did they protect it all when floods and enemies closed in? Wait until you see what Clue 3 reveals. Clue 3. Height and safety. Every single long-term site in Texas sits on high ground looking down at the water source, not right next to it. There's a good reason for that. Morris Mound is on an ancient raised area that's high enough to avoid floods, but close enough to the river for easy access. When the Guadalupe floods really badly, that raised ground stays dry. Paint Rock is a cliff face 70 feet above the Concho River. You can see for miles in every direction. Nothing gets close without you knowing. Hueco Tanks is literally 3 rock hills sticking hundreds of feet out of the flat desert. You can see everything. Easy to defend. The Cat Mounds in East Texas were built up over centuries, layer by layer, making them the highest point in the pine forest around them. The White Shaman Shelter looks down at the Pecos River from a high cliff. Spring Lake sits at the bottom of a rise. The Galt site is on raised ground above Buttermilk Creek. Why does height matter so much? Because floods kill. Because you need to see threats before they see you. Because height means water drains away, which means dry ground, which means you can keep fires going even when it rains.
because sleeping up high means fewer bugs, snakes, and animals that hunt on the ground. But there's something deeper. Height also means you can see the sky clearly. If you're doing a burial, painting a mural about the stars and universe, doing any ceremony meant to connect earth and sky, you do it up high.
Where the stars spin overhead without anything blocking them, the line between survival and religion finally disappears. Wait till you see what happens when you realize the gods they worshipped weren't out in space, but standing right under their feet. For 150 years, archaeologists have looked at these sites and said ancient people chose these locations because they were sacred. We've had it completely backwards. These locations didn't start out sacred. They started out practical, super practical. They were the places where the water never stopped, the stone never ran out, and your family never got flooded out. They were the safest bet in a world where one mistake meant death. But here's what happens when the same place works for 50 generations, for 100, for 200. It stops being a place your grandparents told you about. It becomes the place where your ancestors came from. It becomes the center of your whole universe. It becomes the center of the world, the point where Earth touches sky. The White Shaman mural at the Pecos River shows the birth of the sun and the start of time. It's 26 feet long and about 4,000 years old. The paints are iron ochre, manganese, limonite, and gypsum mixed with bone marrow and applied with brushes made from yucca fiber and human hair. Researchers at Texas State University showed a symbol from the mural to Huichol elders in western Mexico. The elders recognized it right away, 4,000 years later, and they knew exactly what it meant. They told the researchers it represents the sacred mountain. The wavy lines on the sides are a ladder for the sun to climb out of the underworld each morning and go back down each night. A symbol painted in a Texas canyon 4,000 years ago is still recognized by native people in Mexico today. That's not just keeping culture alive, that's a belief system that has lasted longer than every empire in recorded history. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. That mountain is real. It's not a metaphor. It's the actual rock shelter where 200 generations of your people survived because the Pecos River never stopped flowing, because the chert deposits never ran out, because the high ground kept you safe. The religion didn't choose the location. The location being so reliable created the religion. Being sacred is what happens when your best survival odds turn into theology. You can test this. Pull up the computer maps for any major long-term site in Texas. Check the water maps. Check the rock surveys for toolstone quality. Check the height maps for elevation and how easy it is to defend. Every single one has all three things. It's not magic. It's not a mystery. It's math. It's science about the environment. It's smart hunting and gathering tested across 10,000 years in the real world. The mystery isn't why they kept coming back. The mystery is why we are so surprised that smart people recognized a good thing when they saw it and taught their kids to remember it.
That's how survival became religion. But what happened when modern developers and amusement parks accidentally built right on top of these ancient holy places? Now let's talk about what we lost. This part's going to make you angry. The Morris Mound was dug up in the 1930s by a crew during the Great Depression. They pulled over 200 burials out of the ground. Rattlesnake bone necklaces, seashell decorations from the Gulf Coast over 100 miles away, carved deer antlers with geometric patterns, spear points made from stone that came from 200 miles north. The stuff they buried with dead people proved this was a ceremony center with trade connections going hundreds of miles. The crew wrote a report, boxed everything up, and sent it to storage in Austin. The artifacts are still there, at the Texas Archaeological Research Laboratory. But the site itself, it's a cow pasture now, slowly washing away, no sign, no protection, no mention that 10,000 years of continuous human ritual happened on that exact piece of ground. Most people in Victoria have never even heard the name Morris Mound. Spring Lake got turned into an amusement park in 1950. Aquarina Springs ran for almost 48 years. Tourists watched performing mermaids in an underwater theater. A trained chicken played tic-tac-toe. The whole time, 12,000-year-old Clovis artifacts were sitting in the lake bed 12 feet below the show. Nobody knew. The first real underwater dig started in 1978. The Rock Wall, a 20-mile-long stone formation that stretches under Dallas suburbs in a perfect rectangle, is buried under strip malls, housing developments, and a Chick-fil-A. The town of Rockwall is literally named after it. Most people living there never see it. Most have no idea it exists. We paved over the proof. We built water parks on top of it. We named towns after it and then forgot why. But here's the beautiful part. Here's what gives me hope. Some of it survived, and some of the people protecting it are doing it better than anyone could have imagined. The Gault site is now owned by the Archaeological Conservancy. Michael Collins, the University of Texas archaeologist who dug it up, used his own money to buy the land and donate it. They've dug up 3% of the site. 97% of it is still there, untouched, waiting for future archaeologists with better technology and better questions. Waco Tanks State Park only lets 70 people in every day. That's it. Most areas need a guided tour with a park ranger. You can't just wander around. You can't touch the paintings. The protection is strict because what's at stake is real. Paint Rock is on private land. The Sims-Campbell family has owned it since the 1880s when their ancestor DeSims bought the property specifically because he saw the paintings getting vandalized and decided to protect them. For 140 years, this one family has done a better job protecting 1,500 paintings than most government sites in America. And the White Shaman mural. Dr. Jean Clote, a French prehistorian who has studied rock art on every continent where people live, called it second to none and ranked it among the top rock art anywhere in the world. It's protected now by the Rock Art Foundation. Researchers are still studying it, still finding new connections between symbols painted in a Texas canyon and native knowledge systems that have survived 4,000 years. That's not a mystery. That's a miracle.
We paved over the proof and forgot what we were standing on. But what does that mean for the ground beneath us today? For 15,000 years, people returned to the same Texas hills, not because of magic, because the water never stopped, the stone never ran out, the high ground never failed. Survival became ritual. Ritual became tradition. Tradition became what we call sacred. We paved over most of it, built water parks on top of 12,000-year-old tools, turned burial mounds into cow pastures. But the pattern is still there, carved into the land, flowing from the springs, waiting in the stone. The question isn't what they buried under Texas, it's what we're still standing on.